up, fam? It's your girl, Mrs. Tony 2 times, and I'm back with another video. In this episode of Hood Tales, we'll be talking about the absolutely tragic story of an Oklahoma man who did the unimaginable to his family and their neighbor just weeks after being released from prison. But before we get into this video, welcome if you're new here to our channel. Please feel free to subscribe, click that notification bell so you never miss an upload. If you're rocking with the content, hit that like button, share this video with everyone you know. Make sure you watch until the end to hear the full story. All right, let's jump right into it. Please be advised of the following. In 2017, Lawrence Paul Anderson, in his late 30s, was an alleged Ready Rock dealer and deemed a violent offender. After being charged with a probation violation and other charges, a judge sentenced Lawrence to 20 years in prison. In July 2019, Lawrence Anderson requested for his sentence to be commuted, but the board rejected his request. He applied again in August 2019, and this time his request was approved. According to reports, Lawrence was among 800 Oklahoma inmates whose application for commutation was considered in January 2020 as a part of a state law that took place in November 2019. The law changed guidelines for certain drug and property crimes, which made hundreds eligible for an accelerated commutation process. The governor of Oklahoma signed off on the commutation, and Lawrence's sentence was reduced to 9 years instead of 20. In January 2021, Lawrence was released on parole after serving a little more than 3 years behind bars. This could have been an opportunity for a fresh start for Lawrence after getting another chance to come back out and adjust to society. After his release, Lawrence went to stay with his uncle, Leon Pye, and aunt, Delcy Pye, in Chickasha, Oklahoma. Both were in their 60s and happily married. The lovely couple met in the cotton field when Leon was driving Delcy's mother's cotton field truck when she was 16 years old. They have been together ever since. Leon and Delcy had been married for 50 years. At their 50th anniversary celebration, their children and grandchildren all got together to celebrate the monumental milestone. Family is important to the Pyes, and they were tight-knit and looked out for each other. That's why the Pyes opened their home to their nephew. He was family. But things took a terrifying turn just weeks after Lawrence was released from prison. No one could have seen what would come next. On Tuesday, February 9th, 2021, the Pyes' neighbor, 41-year-old Andrea Blankenship, was at her home across the street with her 2 German Shepherd dogs. Andrea was of Native American lineage and described as resilient, very kind, and wore her heart on her sleeve. She was a single mom of 2 and loved being a mother. Andrea worked from home and was more than likely just going about her usual workday. On that cold February day, a man later identified as Lawrence Anderson broke into her home through the back door. For whatever diabolical reason, Lawrence launched a vicious attack on Andrea, cutting her and wounding her numerous times, ultimately ending her life. After the heinous encounter, he then did the most horrifying thing by removing her heart and taking it with him. He left Andrea in her home, lifeless, while he headed back to his aunt and uncle's house with the organ. On that day, Leon and Delcy Pye's 4-year-old granddaughter, Chaos Yates, was there visiting. It was a pretty normal day for the family. But when Lawrence returned and asked his aunt for some water, things escalated. Lawrence went after his aunt and uncle. Reports say he brutally wounded his uncle, taking his life. His unprovoked encounter with his aunt was also vicious, maiming her in the horrific incident, leaving her with one eye. Lawrence then turned his rage towards Chaos, also tragically ending her life. A 911 hang-up call led law enforcement to the Pye's house on the usually quiet Chickasha Street. Chickasha police went to the home to check on it and heard someone calling inside for help. Officers forced their way into the house and found Leon Pye and his granddaughter slain. Delcy Pye was severely injured but survived the attack. Lawrence, still inside when officers arrived, was taken to the hospital as well. Delcy was the person who called 911. She was later able to identify her nephew, Lawrence, as the person who was responsible for her injuries and the slaying of her husband and granddaughter. 2 days later, while Lawrence was under arrest in the hospital, he admitted to slaying the Pye's neighbor, Andrea Blankenship. When police went to Andrea's residence, they found her surrounded by various objects or weapons they believed were used in her slaying. Law enforcement told reporters that Lawrence also confessed to one of the worst acts of humankind. He allegedly told investigators after he removed the heart from Andrea, he took it to his aunt and uncle's house and cooked it with potatoes, then attempted to serve it to his elderly aunt and uncle. When they refused to eat it, he said that's when he got angry and went after his relatives. He told investigators he did these terrifying things to release the demons. Reports say at the time of his arrest, police found a vial of PCP on Lawrence, but it was never certain if Lawrence was on any substances at the time of the incident. During a bail hearing a few days after he was charged with the heinous crimes, he sobbed in court and asked the judge not to give him bail. Family members of Andrea Blankenship, Leon Pye, and little Chaos Yates couldn't wrap their minds around what had happened to their loved ones. The savagery of the actions committed was way too much to bear. Delcy, the survivor of this tragedy, couldn't believe her own flesh and blood could have done this to her, her husband, and granddaughter. Chaos's parents were crushed to lose their baby girl. The biggest piece of their family was stripped away senselessly. Chaos's father, Leon and Delcy's son, couldn't believe he lost both his father and daughter, but is comforted that they may be together. Reports say that little Chaos was also of Native American lineage. Andrea's family is devastated by her loss. Her daughter had spoken to her the day she lost her life. She was calling and texting her mom only to find out days later what had happened to her. The tragedy seemed even harder to deal with when loved ones found out the circumstances behind Lawrence and his early release from prison. When the outrage over the slayings hit the governor's office, an investigation was conducted into the 3-to-1 recommendation of Lawrence's commutation. It was revealed that Lawrence was mistakenly recommended for commutation. After his initial request got denied, the first time, he was required to wait 3 years before he applied again. But just a month later, he applied, and that time, his recommendation was accepted. An internal investigation showed the error was discovered in time for it to be corrected. But they went ahead with the recommendation anyway after one person's unilateral decision to not bring the error to the attention of the board or governor's office. This all led to Lawrence being released several years earlier than his original 20-year sentence. Family members of the victims and Oklahoma community leaders were outraged to find out that Lawrence should not have been released on the streets. According to reports, the governor acted to commute his sentence after being told Lawrence was going to live in Texas with his daughter and work for his son-in-law in the oil field, according to staff. His plans for release were later changed to the home of his uncle and aunt in Chickasha. Lawrence had listed his aunt and uncle's home as his post-incarceration address without their consent, but had only visited once. Reports say the Pies were surprised to see their nephew just show up and that he was out of prison. The Oklahoma City attorney said the Pies had no prior knowledge that Lawrence was being released. They had never consented to him listing their address as his home. The family of the slain and surviving victim sued state agencies and the governor's office because of the fatal mistake. The lawsuit is still pending. In March 2023, 2 years after the dreadful day, Lawrence Anderson had pleaded guilty and was sentenced to serve the rest of his natural life behind bars. He also agreed to never seek an early release by appeal or seeking commutation. He also can't tell or sell his story through any type of media outlet. According to the state, the families came to the decision to seek a plea deal instead of going to trial to try to seek an execution, which could take over a decade or more. The plea would also prevent the family from having to go through a trial and reliving all the gory details of the case. The victims' impact statements were painful to listen to. All the heartbreak, pain, and trauma filled the courtroom as family members of the victims spoke. Lawrence's reaction in court was expressionless at times. He showed some emotion, but he never apologized for what he had done. This was such a hard story to get through. Honestly, I did leave out some details because it was just way too graphic and could be triggering for some. My heart goes out to everyone involved and impacted by this tragedy. My deepest condolences to the family of Andrea Blankenship, Leon Pye, and Chaos Yates. My thoughts and prayers are with them and with Mrs. Delcy Pye, a true survivor. She credits God as the reason why she survived. She knows Lawrence was in his right state of mind when he did what he did. She said because she saw what he did in her home and to himself, and if he really wasn't aware, he would have ended his own life. Lawrence thought he had ended his aunt's life, but she only pretended to be gone to fend him off. Man, this story is just all so crazy and unfathomable. It's just pure evil. There's no other words to explain it. Fam, tell me your thoughts on this in the comments below. All right, fam, that's it for this episode of Hood Tales. Thank you all so much for watching and making it till the end. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. This is your girl, Mrs. Tony 2 Times, and I'm out.